Hello, humanoids! This is Ian T. Mello, and welcome to Squared Circle History, the podcast that chooses a promotion, focuses on a specific year, and gives a comprehensive and unbiased look at the best matches, moments, promos, and feuds. I encourage you to check out the actual footage of the wrestling events that are being discussed because, and I cannot stress this enough, the intent of this podcast is to make new fans of the product of the yesteryear. I'm a lifelong wrestling fan, and I love all of the history that there is of televised professional wrestling. So let's travel through wrestling history together here on Squared Circle History. Today we are going to focus on World Championship Wrestling in 1994, and what a year it was. To put you in the right time frame, let's go through what was happening in pop culture during the year of 1994. At the box office, we saw the release of memorable films such as Pulp Fiction, The Crow, Shawshank Redemption, Forrest Gump, Natural Born Killers, Leon the Professional, Interview with the Vampire, Legends of the Fall, Richie Rich, The Shadow, True Lies, The Little Rascals, Street Fighter, The Mask, Angels in the Outfield, Speed, Time Cop, City Slickers 2, It's Pat, Blank Man, Miracle on 34th Street, Ace Ventura Pet Detective, Dumb and Dumber, The Flintstones, The Lion King, Gotti, Mixed Nuts, Nobody's Fool, and Quiz Show. In record stores, we saw the release of such albums as Super Unknown by Soundgarden, Jar of Flies by Alice in Chains, Nirvana Unplugged, Far Beyond Driven by Pantera, Definitely Maybe by Oasis, Grace by Jeff Buckley, Ill Communication by the Beastie Boys, Park Life by Blur, Ready to Die by the Notorious B.I.G., Under the Pink by Tori Amos, The Holy Bible by the Manic Street Preachers, Sleeps with Angels by Neil Young, Let Love In by Nick Cave and the Bad Seeds, American Recordings by Johnny Cash, Welcome to Sky Valley by Caius, American Thighs by Veruca Salt, T-Cal by Method Man, The Division Bell by Pink Floyd, Purple by Stone Temple Pilots, No Need to Argue by the Cranberries, Illmatic by Nas, Live Through This by Hole, The Downward Spiral by Nine Inch Nails, Dookie by Green Day, Mellow Gold by Beck, Vitalogy by Pearl Jam, Monster by R.E.M., Crazy Sexy Cool by TLC, Music for the Jilted Generation by The Prodigy, Smash by The Offspring, Bedtime Stories by Madonna, Second Coming by The Stone Roses, Pandemonium by Killing Joke, Portrait of an American Family by Marilyn Manson, Betty by Helmet, Stoner Witch by the Melvins, Deliverance by Corrosion of Conformity, The Last Temptation by Alice Cooper, and debut albums from Korn, Outkast, and Weezer. On television, we saw the debuts of shows such as ER, Friends, Ken Burns' Baseball, Party of Five, Babylon 5, Touched by an Angel, Weird Science, The Magic School Bus, Sister Sister, Real monsters. General Hospital. All that. Where in the World is Carmen Sandiego? Gargoyles. Street Sharks. And Spider-Man the Animated Series. In the news, football legend O.J. Simpson was accused of slaying his wife, Nicole Brown Simpson, and friend Ron Goldman, leading to a police chase on the freeways of Los Angeles that was watched on television by 95 million viewers. American Olympic figure skater Nancy Kerrigan was attacked following a practice session for the year's Olympic Games. The attack was orchestrated by teammate and rival Tonya Harding. United States President Bill Clinton was accused of sexual harassment. Major League Baseball went on strike, and film director Steven Spielberg won his first Oscar for his film Schindler's List. Iconic Nirvana frontman Kurt Cobain tragically died of a reported self-inflicted gunshot wound. While Vince McMahon beat the federal government and cleared his name in the steroid trial, the WWF suffered greatly with record-low business. But all this paled in comparison to what was happening in the WCW, with the biggest name in American pro wrestling joining the promotion and flipping everything upside down. Join us on this trip as we journey back to World Championship Wrestling in 1994. Nostalgia was in the air on the January 1st edition of WCW Saturday Night, with the celebration still in full swing for Nature Boy Ric Flair's WCW World Heavyweight Championship victory over Vader. The main event featured a clash between Sting and the WCW United States Champion, Stunning Steve Austin. Colonel Robert Parker stood in Austin's corner, giving him advice when needed. The match ended in a disqualification when Flying Brian Pillman chased Colonel Parker around ringside and into the ring. Pillman struck his former Hollywood Blondes tag team partner and caused the referee to signal for the bell. Post-match, Mean Gene interviewed a winded Austin who claimed he could have kept fighting. Colonel Parker talked trash about Pillman, hyping an eventual bout between the two. Footage aired on the January 8th episode of Worldwide Wrestling of Mean Gene Okerlund interviewing the WCW World Heavyweight Champion, the Nature Boy Ric Flair, following his Starcade victory. Flair discussed his bout with Vader, putting him over as a strong competitor. The January 8th edition of Saturday Night saw Mean Gene Okerlund interview an excited Shockmaster. He eagerly told Gene that his friend was coming to WCW. A vignette aired with a masked wrestler decked in blue and gold, claiming that he wasn't coming to WCW to lose. The January 15th episode of Saturday Night saw Ice Train interrupt a ringside interview that Mean Gene Okerlund was conducting with Ron Simmons. Ice Train said that he needs to get in the ring against Simmons in order to test himself. Simmons got offended, saying that Ice Train isn't ready for the match. Still, Ice Train insisted that they face off. Simmons smacked Ice Train across the face and walked away. The former Hollywood Blondes did battle in the main event, with Flying Brian Pillman facing the WCW United States Champion, Stunning Steve Austin, in a non-title match. Pillman carried a chicken mask to the ring, which he taunted Colonel Parker with, hyping their upcoming match at the Clash of the Champions. Pillman was too preoccupied with Parker, causing Austin to gain the advantage. Despite interference by Parker, Pillman reversed a body slam and rolled up Austin for a pinfall victory. The Super Shockmaster made his in-ring debut on the January 16th episode of the main event. Tony Schiavone interviewed the Super Shockmaster following the match. He sounded a lot like Shockmaster, but he said that's where the resemblance ends. The Super Shockmaster announced his intentions to challenge Vader. Mean Gene interviewed the WCW World Heavyweight Champion Nature Boy Ric Flair on the January 22nd episode of Saturday Night. Flair referred to Vader as a bully that finally got his. The main event featured Ric Flair, Sting, and The Boss against Ravishing Rick Rude, Stunning Steve Austin, and Ron Simmons. Ice Train confronted Simmons, asking why he'd align himself with Colonel Parker. All order was lost with all 6 men brawling. Amongst the chaos, Sting rolled up Simmons for the victory. The Clash of the Champions took place on January 27th, with Mean Gene Okerlund making the opening introductions. He was interrupted by the debuting Bobby the Brain Heenan, who would be the company's newest color commentator, much to the dismay of Mean Gene. The main event saw the WCW World Heavyweight Champion, the Nature Boy Ric Flair, and Sting face Ravishing Rick Rude and Vader. Order was lost, with Vader grabbing a chair. WCW Commissioner Nick Bockwinkel stood in the way of Vader, preventing him from causing any damage. Vader screamed at his manager Harley Race to do something, while the referee kicked Vader out of the match. With Flair helped away by officials, the match was now down to Sting against Rude. It was a nail-biting back-and-forth sequence, with Sting hitting Rude with a tombstone piledriver, followed by a big top rope splash to score the pinfall victory. WCW Commissioner Nick Bockwinkel held a press conference on the January 29th episode of WCW Saturday Night. He announced that Nature Boy Ric Flair was injured, and his scheduled match at SuperBrawl against Vader would be postponed. Vader became irate, getting in the face of Flair. Ricky the Dragon Steamboat stepped up to Vader, with officials having to hold him back. Bockwinkel fined Vader $25,000 for his actions, as Harley Race led them out of the room. After defeating Colonel Robert Parker at the Clash of the Champions, Flying Brian Pillman came to the ring with a chicken suit in hand. Colonel Parker made his way to the ring, with Stunning Steve Austin by his side. Back in the ring, Tex Slazenger and Shanghai Pierce attacked Pillman from behind. Austin joined in on the beatdown until the locker room emptied to save Pillman. Parker was surrounded with nowhere to hide while Pillman handed over the chicken suit. Parker reluctantly put the suit on while the crowd chanted KFC at him. The icing on the cake came when Pillman put the chicken mask on Parker's head and led the crowd in flapping their arms, adding insult to injury. WCW World Heavyweight Champion the Nature Boy Ric Flair was interviewed by Mean Gene on the February 12th edition of Saturday Night. Gene announced that the match between Flair and Vader was back on for Super Brawl and would take place in the Thunder Cage. Flair admitted that he was scared, but said he was the dirtiest player in the game long before Vader had a name. The muscular blonde known as Terra Rising made his debut, picking up an impressive victory. Of course, Rising would go on to become the future Triple H in the WWF. The February 19th edition of Saturday Night saw Vader annihilate 4 men in preparation for his match with Ric Flair at SuperBrawl. Later in the broadcast, Mean Gene interviewed Flair, who talked about what it meant to be the man. SuperBrawl IV took place on February 20th and saw the WCW television champion Lord Steven Regal battle the enforcer Arn Anderson. Regal was accompanied to the ring by Sir William. The two put on a technical wrestling clinic in a wonderful display of holds and counters. Sir William repeatedly got involved, striking Anderson with his umbrella behind the referee's back. With the time limit approaching, Anderson scrambled for a pin on Regal. With 6 seconds remaining in the 20-minute time limit, Regal reversed a sunset flip, held onto Williams' umbrella for leverage, and scored the pinfall victory. Sting, Dustin Rhodes, and Flying Brian Pillman battled Ravishing Rick Rude, the WCW United States Champion Stunning Steve Austin, and Mr. Wonderful Paul Orndorff in a Thunder Cage. It didn't take long for the cage to come into play, with both Sting and Flying Brian whipping Austin against the steel. After lighting up Austin's chest with chops, it was Pillman's turn to taste the steel. A bloody Pillman found himself being triple-teamed, while Sting and Rhodes anxiously looked on. But the ever-resilient Pillman battled back and made the hot tag to Sting, who cleaned house. Sting bounced Orndorff's head against the cage repeatedly, busting him open. The action continued, with Rhodes knocking Austin off the apron and hooking his leg on the bars of the cage. All 6 men threw the rulebook out the window, with the brawl dwindling down to Pillman and Austin. Sting press-slammed Pillman onto Austin and scored the pinfall victory. The brawling continued, with Rude slamming the cage door on Sting's face and nailing him with a rude awakening on the floor. In the main event, the WCW World Heavyweight Champion, the Nature Boy Ric Flair, defended his title against Big Van Vader inside of the Thunder Cage, with the Boss serving as the special guest referee. Harley Race repeatedly got involved until the Boss clobbered him and tried to handcuff him to the cage. Vader ambushed the Boss and handcuffed him to the cage. Flair soon found himself the victim of a 2-on-1 beatdown at the hands of Vader and Race. Arn Anderson raced to ringside, unable to get in the cage. Race held up a woozy Flair, while Vader leaped off the second rope with a tackle. Flair moved, and Vader flattened Race. Flair cleaned house, while Ricky Steamboat tried breaking the lock on the cage. The Boss freed himself, attacking Vader and Race with a nightstick. Flair applied the figure 4 leg lock on Vader, with the Boss calling for the bell. Head of Security Doug Dillinger broke into the cage just in time for Flair to escape with his championship. Meanwhile, Vader was livid, screaming at commentators Bobby the Brain Heenan and Tony Schiavone to end the show. The February 26th edition of Saturday Night was headlined by Vader against Ricky the Dragon Steamboat, with Steamboat unloading on Vader. Steamboat clobbered Vader repeatedly with a steel chair behind the referee's back. Harley Race turned the tides, attacking Steamboat behind the referee's back and allowing Vader to gain the advantage. Steamboat battled back and hit Vader with numerous aerial attacks. Race distracted the referee, with Steamboat grabbing him by the lapels. Vader charged at Steamboat, who moved, with Race knocked senseless. Steamboat suplexed Race into the ring. Vader attempted to splash Steamboat, with the Dragon moving and Race feeling the mammoth weight of the former champion. Steamboat could only fend off two former world champions for so long before they overpowered the Dragon. The Boss ran to the ring to save Steamboat, with the match thrown out as a disqualification. The March 6th edition of the main event saw the WCW United States Champion, Stunning Steve Austin, with Colonel Parker in his corner, face Flyin' Brian Pillman, who had Dustin Rhodes in his corner. Pillman was ferocious, sending Austin cowering to the feet of Colonel Parker. Ever crafty, Austin regained the advantage, sending Pillman soaring off the apron and crashing against a steel guardrail. Back inside the ring, Austin wore down Pillman. Colonel Parker attempted to lay in a cheap shot, but Dustin Rhodes ran him off. Pillman regained the advantage and nearly had the match won if Colonel Parker hadn't interfered. Dustin chased Parker into the ring, laying in a beatdown, but causing a disqualification. Austin and Parker ran away up the aisle as the referee declared the match a no contest. On the March 12th edition of Saturday Night, Mean Gene interviewed the WCW World Heavyweight Champion, the Nature Boy Ric Flair. The Nature Boy said he'd be keeping a close eye on the main event, which would be a #1 contenders match between Ricky the Dragon Steamboat and Stunning Steve Austin. Mean Gene was on location in Florida, scouring the beach for Hulk Hogan. After mistaking a beachgoer for Hogan, Gene was confronted by the actual Hulkster. Hogan hyped his new television series, Thunder in Paradise. Bobby the Brain Heenan interrupted, asking Hogan if he had unfinished business in his wrestling career. Heenan alluded to the Pro Wrestling Illustrated magazine cover that hinted at a possible match between Hogan and Flair. Hogan said that he has prior commitments, but if the rumors are true, Mean Gene will be the first to know. WCW Tag Team Champions the Nasty Boys came to the ring to face a mysterious hooded team. They revealed themselves to be Kevin Sullivan and the Equalizer, with Sullivan throwing a fireball at the Nasties. Knobbs and Sags retreated as the Sullivan brothers caught up with Mean Gene. Kevin Sullivan called his brother by his real name, Dave, with the Equalizer saying it was actually Evad. Kevin corrected his brother, slapping him upside the head. The #1 contenders match between Ricky the Dragon Steamboat and Stunning Steve Austin took place in the main event. It was a highly competitive bout, with Colonel Robert Parker assisting Austin whenever possible. The Dragon fought back valiantly, nearly scoring a pinfall victory if Parker hadn't been distracting referee Nick Patrick. After disposing of Parker, Steamboat began a series of pinfall attempts. Parker ran in to attack Steamboat and cause a disqualification. Steamboat battled back with chops. The Nature Boy Ric Flair ran in to aid Steamboat, who accidentally chopped him. Despite profusely apologizing, an irritated Flair left Steamboat on his own. March 16th in Munich, Germany, was the infamous night that Cactus Jack lost his right ear. During a bout with Vader, Cactus got his head caught in between the ropes. The combination of sweat and the tight cables caused Cactus's ear to rip off of his skull as the referee shoved him through the ropes. Cactus finished the match, losing to Vader shortly after. The March 19th episode of Saturday Night saw Mean Gene question the WCW International Champion, Ravishing Rick Rude, as to why Sting wasn't receiving a title shot. Meanwhile, Sting was stealing Rude's valets for the evening. Sting revealed a contract with Rude's signature, which the valets tricked Rude into signing. As Sting left with the ladies, Rude pulled a fit, wide-eyed as he stared at the contract in disbelief. Mean Gene interviewed the WCW World Heavyweight Champion, the Nature Boy Ric Flair. Flair was flattered at Hulk Hogan's renewed interest in wrestling, but the new #1 contender is Ricky the Dragon Steamboat. Despite this, Flair told Gene to go back to Hogan and consider returning to the ring. Mean Gene caught up with Ricky Steamboat following his victory. The Dragon discussed his storied past with Ric Flair. The Nature Boy interrupted, saying he had respect and admiration for Steamboat. He said that if Steamboat wanted a lesson in using the figure 4, he'd show him. Steamboat yelled at Flair, saying what happened last week was an accident. The Dragon brought up the memorable trilogy he and Flair had in 1989. 2 out of 3 of those matches were awarded to the Dragon. Steamboat said that Flair should be less focused on Hogan and more interested in their match at Spring Stampede. The March 26th edition of Saturday Night saw Mean Gene interview the WCW World Heavyweight Champion, Nature Boy Ric Flair. In regards to the upcoming announcement by Hulk Hogan, the Nature Boy said that he hopes Hogan isn't making the mistake he hears he's going to make. On the April 2nd Worldwide Wrestling, footage aired of Mean Gene interviewing Hulk Hogan on the set of Thunder in Paradise. Hogan said that Gene stirred up a hornet's nest the last time he was there, asking if Hogan could beat Flair. Gene asked Hogan again, with the Hulkster admitting that even his own son asked him if he could beat Ric Flair. Hogan said he didn't know. With the former Brutus the Barber Beefcake in the background, Hogan told Gene that if he returns to the ring, Gene will be the first to know. A video aired on the April 2nd edition of Saturday Night, hyping Vader. In it, Harley Race describes Vader as volatile, vicious, and victorious. Following the video, Mean Gene interviewed Vader and Race. Race hyped Vader's upcoming match with the Boss, saying justice will prevail. Vader called the Boss a fat-headed redneck for costing him the WCW World Heavyweight Championship at SuperBrawl. Mean Gene interviewed the Nature Boy Ric Flair, who addressed Hulk Hogan's comments from the previous week. Flair said that Hogan's son Nicholas wondered if Ric Flair could beat Hogan. He said the answer is yes. Flair invited Hogan to watch him face Ricky Steamboat at Spring Stampede. The Dragon interrupted, telling Flair that he's putting the cart before the horse. Steamboat said, "Who do you think I am, some kind of pushover?" Flair apologized and invited Steamboat to watch him firsthand next week, saying this would be the first time in a while that Steamboat was close to greatness. On the April 9th episode of Worldwide Wrestling, Mean Gene interviewed the World Heavyweight Champion, Nature Boy Ric Flair. The Nature Boy hyped his upcoming bout against Ricky the Dragon Steamboat. he talked about their historic battles, saying things have changed and he is a new Ric Flair. Flair said, "I have been places wrestlers only dream of being." He then called Steamboat the second greatest wrestler alive today. The April 9th episode of Saturday Night saw Mean Gene interview Cactus Jack. With the right side of his head bandaged, Jack talked about losing his ear in a bout against Vader. He then talked about teaming with Max Payne at Spring Stampede to challenge the WCW Tag Team Champions, the Nasty Boys. Mean Gene moderated a satellite interview between the Nature Boy Ric Flair and Ricky the Dragon Steamboat. Things got heated, with Steamboat again frustrated that Flair was looking past him. The Nature Boy remained confident and again invited Steamboat to sit ringside to refresh his memory about how great the Nature Boy truly is. Steamboat came to the ring to watch Flair compete. Flair made his entrance in a suit, handing his jacket and Rolex to Bobby Heenan before entering the ring. It wasn't long before Flair defeated his opponent with the figure 4. Flair wrenched the hold after the bell, pointing at Steamboat. The Dragon raced to the ring and demanded that Flair release the hold on the enhancement talent. Flair finally released the hold, with a heated exchange occurring between the two. Officials surrounded the competitors, with Flair slapping Steamboat across the face. As Steamboat was restrained, Flair retrieved his jacket and Rolex, making a quick exit. Spring Stampede took place on April 17th and featured a brutal match that saw the WCW Tag Team Champions, the Nasty Boys, battle Cactus Jack and Max Payne. It was wild from the start, with both teams brawling on the ramp and around ringside. Cactus and Brian Knobbs battled in the ring over the remnants of a pool cue, which they used to bash one another. Jerry Sags used an open steel chair to bash the back of Max Payne with a stiff shot. Sags followed it up by smashing Cactus over the head with a brutal chair shot. Cactus and Payne battled back, creating more chaos around ringside. Knobbs and Payne brawled up the aisle and towards a souvenir stand. Meanwhile, Cactus and Sags battled around ringside, with split-screen action shown in an attempt to fully cover the wild bout. Payne body slammed Knobbs through a table full of WCW merchandise. Sags and Cactus made their way up the aisle to join their partners. Knobbs tossed Payne through a wall of souvenirs, destroying the booth. Sags picked up a table and bounced it repeatedly off the head of Cactus. On the ramp, Cactus suplexed the table on top of Sags. Before Cactus could make the cover, Knobbs waffled him over the head with a shovel. Payne stole the shovel and beat down Knobbs with it. Sags attempted to pile driver Cactus through the table, but it collapsed under their weight. In a brutal moment, Sags shoved Cactus off the ramp and back first onto the concrete floor. The senseless brutality continued as Sags wailed Cactus across the face with the shovel. Sags covered an unconscious Cactus and scored the pinfall victory. Racing down the ramp, Sags used half of the table to plow down Payne. Stunning Steve Austin defended the World Television Championship against the Great Muta. Colonel Robert Parker stood in Austin's corner, getting cheap shots in on Muta behind the referee's back. Muta persevered, hitting Austin with a top rope Frankensteiner. Parker hopped onto the apron, with Muta striking him with a roundhouse kick. Austin charged, with Muta backdropping the champion over the top rope to cause a disqualification. Ravishing Rick Rude defended the International Heavyweight Championship against Sting. Harley Race interrupted Rude's introduction, saying that Vader wants a shot at the winner. Race took a swing at Sting, who ducked and tossed Race to the floor. Rude attempted to ambush Sting, but dodged the attack and tossed the champion around with ease. The tide soon turned, with Rude attacking the back of Sting. Battling back, Sting tossed Rude around the ring and gained back the advantage. Sting nailed a Stinger splash that caught both Rude and the referee. The Stinger locked Rude in the Scorpion Deathlock, but the referee was too hurt to make the call. Race ran in, with Sting making quick work of him. Vader raced in, with Sting quickly knocking him to the floor. The interference allowed Rude to clip the knee of Sting and set him up for the Rude Awakening. Race entered the ring and swung a chair. Sting ducked, with the chair smashing against the back of Rude. The referee awoke to make the count, with Sting getting the victory. Sting was crowned the new International Heavyweight Champion. The Natural Dustin Rhodes competed against Colonel Robert Parker's new client, Bunkhouse Buck, in a bunkhouse match. Rhodes was full of energy, taking the fight to Buck. Soon after, Buck dodged a cross-body, with Rhodes falling to the floor. With the referee's back turned, Parker attacked Rhodes. Buck smashed a wooden stick over the back of Rhodes and then jammed it in his eye. Blood poured down the face of Rhodes, with Buck using his suspenders to choke the Natural on the ramp. Back in the ring, Rhodes threw powder in the eyes of Buck. Quick to recover, Buck used his belt to whip Rhodes repeatedly. Rhodes regained the advantage, removing his own belt, wrapping it around his fist, and using the buckle to bust open Buck. Removing one of his boots, Rhodes jumped off the second rope, bashing Buck with the boot. Rhodes ripped the shirt off of Buck and began whipping his bare back with the belt. The Natural hit Buck with a running bulldog and made the cover, breaking it once Parker hopped onto the apron. Rhodes suplexed Parker into the ring and began whipping him with the belt. The brawl continued between Rhodes and Buck until Parker slipped his client a pair of brass knuckles. Buck used the brass knuckles to knock out Rhodes and score the pinfall victory. From the locker room, Jesse the Body Ventura attempted to interview an irate, ravishing Rick Rude. Also in the room were Vader and Harley Race, who Rude screamed at for trying to help him, saying that he didn't need any help. Rude shoved Vader, with wrestlers pulling the two apart. Vader was in action against the Boss, with Harley Race getting involved at the start. On the ramp, Race held back the arms of the Boss. Vader charged, with the Boss moving and Race getting tackled. The two brawled it out until Vader tossed the Boss into the ring. Racing down the ramp, Vader dove off the top rope, with the Boss getting his knees up to provide a harsh landing. The Boss took the fight to the floor, where he Irish whipped Vader over a guardrail. Back in the ring, the Boss body slammed Vader. bleeding from the eye, Vader began punching the boss in the face. In a scary moment, Vader backdropped the boss, who barely cleared the ropes and tumbled to the floor. In the ring, Vader crushed the boss with a big splash, but only got a 2 count. The boss retaliated by back suplexing Vader to the mat. Both behemoths knocked each other down with powerful clotheslines. Vader was looking for a Vader bomb until the boss tossed him off the ropes to a big ovation. The boss DDT'd Vader off the second rope, but only got a 2 count. Diving off the top rope, the boss took down Vader with a flying body tackle. The boss again dove off the top rope, with Vader catching him in midair and hitting a power slam. Vader dragged the boss to a corner and nailed a Vader bomb. The boss kicked out at 2. Vader soared through the air with an impressive Vader salt and scored the pinfall victory. Following the match, Race tried to handcuff the boss. Gaining his bearings, the boss began battering both Race and Vader with a nightstick. Commissioner Bockwinkel ordered the boss to leave the ring, walking him away up the aisle. Backstage, Bockwinkel took the nightstick and handcuffs away from the boss. Bockwinkel went a step further, saying, "You're no longer the boss." In the main event, the Nature Boy Ric Flair defended the WCW World Heavyweight Championship against Ricky the Dragon Steamboat. It was a scientific bout from the start, with each man going hold for hold with one another. Frustrated, Flair slapped Steamboat across the face. Steamboat slapped back. The Dragon tossed Flair around with a pair of flying head scissors before hitting a drop kick that sent the champion tumbling to the floor. Steamboat rolled Flair back in, dove off the top rope, and nailed a flying overhand chop to the head of the Nature Boy for a 2 count. Both men began trading chops to the chest until referee Nick Patrick laid down the law. Steamboat took the fight to the mat until Flair began fighting dirty to gain control. Flair dropped a knee onto the forehead of Steamboat and scrambled for a pinfall, with the Dragon kicking out each time. Flair dove at Steamboat with a cross body that sent both men tumbling over the top rope. On the floor, Flair attempted a pile driver, with Steamboat reversing it with a backdrop. Steamboat set Flair against a steel guardrail and then raced at him. Flair moved, with Steamboat smashing against the guardrail. Back in the ring, Steamboat superplexed Flair off the top rope for a 2 count. Steamboat Irish whipped Flair onto the apron and chopped him to the floor. The Dragon dove off the top rope, hitting Flair with a flying knife-edge chop. A desperate Flair pulled Steamboat by the tights to send him tumbling through the ropes and to the floor. Back in the ring, Flair attempted a knee drop, but Steamboat caught his knee and applied a figure 4 leg lock. Every time Flair inched towards the ropes, Steamboat pulled him back to the middle of the ring. Flair grabbed Steamboat's arm, pulled him forward, and poked him in the eye to break the hold. The Nature Boy attempted a suplex, but his knees gave out. Steamboat made the cover, with Flair barely kicking out. The Dragon soared off the top rope, taking down Flair with a high cross body for a 2 count. Flair ducked a chop and took down Steamboat with a stiff clothesline. The champion climbed to the top rope, with Steamboat body slamming him all the way to the mat below. Steamboat jumped off the top rope with a big splash. Flair rolled out of the way, and the Dragon smashed onto the mat. the Nature Boy locked in a figure 4, with the Dragon making a dramatic crawl to the bottom rope to break the hold. Flair attempted another figure 4, but Steamboat rolled him up with an inside cradle for a 2 count. Steamboat placed Flair on the top rope and hit a huge superplex. The Dragon made the cover, with Flair barely kicking out. Steamboat lifted Flair up in a double chicken wing and fell backwards. The referee made the 3 count, with both men's shoulders on the mat. Because of this, Flair retained his title, with Steamboat irate. The April 23rd episode of Worldwide Wrestling saw Mean Gene Okerlund interview the World Television Champion, Lord Steven Regal, who had Sir William by his side. William held the Marquis of Queensberry Cup, which Regal claimed he'd won at the Royal Albert Hall in front of the Queen herself. Regal explained the rules that he competed under. 5-minute rounds with no punching, kicking, or eye gouges. Clean breaks, 10 counts on the floor, and knockouts allowed as a means of victory. He said that the only person he could think of that may be able to compete against him under these rules would be the WCW World Heavyweight Champion, the Nature Boy Ric Flair, although Regal was skeptical that even he couldn't compete under those rules. Regal said that if Flair could beat him, he could have the cup. After a commercial break, Flair responded to the challenge, telling Mean Gene that he accepted. The April 23rd edition of Saturday Night saw Mean Gene Okerlund introduce the debuting Sensuous Sherry. She walked onto the set and kissed Gene on the lips. Sherry said that she was looking for a man in WCW to fulfill her needs. She said that she wants the WCW World Heavyweight Championship. The April 30th episode of Worldwide Wrestling saw the WCW World Heavyweight Champion, the Nature Boy Ric Flair, face the World Television Champion, Lord Steven Regal, in a Marquis of Queensberry rules match. It was a highly technical bout, with both men using their best mat work to subdue the other. There were multiple pinfall attempts within a short span of time, putting one another to the test in an exciting exchange. The 5-minute time limit expired, with Regal looking better after the bout. Regal was declared the winner of the first round by judges' decision. In the main event, Vader battled Cactus Jack in a Texas Tornado match. They battled to the floor, where Cactus waffled Vader over the head with a steel chair and scored a pinfall. Vader got up before the 10 count, with the match continuing. Harley Race got involved, but Cactus made quick work of him. Cactus somersaulted off the apron, taking down Vader. Grabbing the chair, Cactus again waffled Vader over the head. The action continued in the ring, where Cactus jumped on the back of Vader with a sleeper hold. Vader fell backwards, breaking the hold and crushing Cactus. 2 Vader bombs followed onto Cactus, followed by a big splash off the second rope. Cactus kicked out of a pinfall attempt at 2. Vader attempted another Vader bomb, but Cactus rolled out of the way. Race pulled Cactus to the floor and bashed him over the head with a chair. Vader powerbombed Cactus on the floor and scored a pinfall. Cactus was unable to answer the 10 count, with Vader declared the winner. The April 30th edition of Saturday Night saw Mean Gene Okerlund interview the WCW Commissioner, Nick Bockwinkel. They discussed the controversial finish to the WCW World Heavyweight Championship match at Spring Stampede. Bockwinkel said he couldn't award Ricky the Dragon Steamboat the title because he didn't conclusively defeat Ric Flair. Out came the Nature Boy Ric Flair, who was irate at the potential of the World Championship being held up. As Flair shoved the title towards Bockwinkel, Steamboat interrupted. Steamboat put his finger in Flair's face, calling him an egomaniac. He told Flair that he had the match won. Steamboat told Flair to face the facts. Both men marched away, with Bockwinkel saying he'd have a decision before the end of the broadcast. Mean Gene was interrupted by two members of the Red Beret-wearing coalition known as the Guardian Angels. They were looking for Ray Traylor, the man formerly known as the Boss. Traylor made his way to the set, with the Guardian Angels looking to make Traylor a member of their group. Humbled, Traylor accepted the offer to train with them. Later, Mean Gene interviewed Bockwinkel, who said that in 2 weeks there would be a match to determine a conclusive WCW World Heavyweight Champion. Flair and Steamboat would battle one more time, with the title on the line. The May 7th episode of Worldwide Wrestling saw the Nature Boy Ric Flair face Lord Steven Regal in the second round of the Marquis of Queensberry Cup. After the 5 minutes expired, the judges scored the match even, with the bout declared a draw. The May 7th edition of Saturday Night saw Arn Anderson interrupt an interview that Mean Gene Okerlund was conducting with the Nature Boy Ric Flair. Anderson asked Flair when they were going to reform the Four Horsemen. Flair said that when he's done dealing with Ricky the Dragon Steamboat, he'll answer Anderson's question. Footage was shown from Japan, where Sting defended the International Heavyweight Championship against Ravishing Rick Rude. During the bout, Sting hit a dive over the top rope, landing on Rude, who fell backwards onto the edge of a platform that the ring was set up on. The impact caused Rude to injure his C4 and C5 vertebrae. Despite the career-ending injury, Rude finished the match and scored a pinfall victory over Sting to win the International Heavyweight Championship. The May 14th edition of Worldwide Wrestling featured the third round of the Marquis of Queensberry Cup between Nature Boy Ric Flair and Lord Steven Regal. Flair took control in this round, locking Regal in a figure 4 to close out the 5-minute time period. The judges scored the round unanimously in favor of Flair. The May 14th episode of Saturday Night featured the Nature Boy Ric Flair against Ricky the Dragon Steamboat to determine the WCW World Heavyweight Champion. Colonel Robert Parker came to ringside to get a better look at the action. Flair struck Steamboat with thunderous chops that echoed through center stage. Steamboat chopped back, but fell victim to the nefarious tactics of the dirtiest player in the game. Still, Steamboat persevered, superplexing Flair off the top rope for a 2 count. Flair took down the Dragon with a sleeper, with the fans rallying behind Steamboat. The fight spilled to the floor, where Steamboat suplexed Flair with a thud. Steamboat rammed Flair's leg repeatedly against a steel ring post. Back in the ring, Steamboat locked Flair in a figure 4, with the Nature Boy screaming in pain. Flair made it to the bottom rope in dramatic fashion to break the hold. Steamboat dove off the top rope, with Flair rolling out of the way and the Dragon smashing against the canvas. Flair locked Steamboat in a figure 4, holding onto the ropes behind the referee's back for an unfair advantage. Steamboat battled back, superplexing Flair off the top rope with a sickening thud. The Dragon connected with a flying chop off the top rope for a 2 count. Steamboat dove off the top rope with a high cross body that took out both Flair and the referee. The referee awoke to count multiple quick pinfall attempts. Steamboat attempted a leapfrog, but didn't jump high enough, with Flair's head smashing against the stomach of the Dragon. This allowed Flair to score the pinfall victory to reclaim his WCW World Heavyweight Championship. Following the match, Mean Gene interviewed Colonel Robert Parker, who had a suitcase full of money. Out came Flair, who took the money for signing to face Parker's mystery opponent. Flair then punched Parker in the face as the show came to a close. The May 21st edition of Worldwide Wrestling featured Round 4 in the Marquis of Queensberry Cup between Nature Boy Ric Flair and Lord Steven Regal. After the 5-minute time limit, it was announced that the bout was a draw. The May 21st episode of Saturday Night saw Mean Gene Okerlund interview the WCW World Heavyweight Champion, the Nature Boy Ric Flair. Gene revealed that Hulk Hogan was in Chicago for Spring Stampede, but didn't show up to the show. Flair invited Hogan to show up to Slamboree the following night. Slamboree took place on May 22nd in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and saw Nick Bockwinkel make a major announcement. Bockwinkel read a statement saying that the recent title change in Japan between Sting and Ravishing Rick Rude has been rescinded due to Rude using the championship belt to bash Sting. Thus, Bockwinkel returned the International Heavyweight Championship to Sting. Nobly, Sting later said that he didn't want to receive the title in that fashion. Sting said that he'd fight for it in the main event. In a Legends match, Terry Funk battled Tully Blanchard, with Gordon Solie joining Bobby the Brain Heenan on commentary. With the crowd chanting ECW, Funk hugged ECW front row regular Hat Guy before the start of the match. The bout was wild, with both men brawling around ringside and on the ramp. Funk ripped a wooden board off the side of the ramp and bashed Blanchard over the head with it. Back in the ring, Funk pile drove Blanchard through the wooden board. Back on the ramp, Funk drilled Blanchard with a DDT. Making their way back into the ring, Funk spiked Blanchard with a pile driver. Funk moonsaulted off the top rope, with Blanchard rolling out of the way and the Funker crashing to the canvas. The brawling continued, with Funk Irish whipping Blanchard into referee Nick Patrick. Funk threw a chair into the ring and attempted to pile drive Blanchard off the top rope. Blanchard crashed to the canvas while Funk sat backwards and threw the chair. Just as the referee awoke, Blanchard struck him with an elbow to the head. On the ramp, Funk bashed Blanchard with a branding iron. Nick Patrick called for the bell, with the match declared a double disqualification. Funk stumbled around ringside, stole Hat Guy's hat, and dropped an elbow onto the famous hat. World Television Champion Lord Steven Regal battled the living legend Larry Zbyszko in a non-title match. Zbyszko tossed Regal around, frustrating the champion. Regal gained his bearings and began wrenching at Zbyszko with multiple submissions. Sir William interfered, bashing Zbyszko with an umbrella. Still, Zbyszko reversed a butterfly suplex attempt and scored the pinfall victory over Regal. Gordon Solie introduced the 6 inductees into the WCW Pro Wrestling Hall of Fame, with Lou Thesz presenting them with their plaques. The inductees were Harley Race, The Crusher, The Big Cat Ernie Ladd, The Assassin, Ole Anderson, and a posthumous induction for Dick the Bruiser. Dustin Rhodes battled Bunkhouse Buck in a bull rope match that was a wild brawl from the start. Rhodes was ruthless, using the rope and the cowbell to bruise Buck. The tides turned, with Buck pulling Rhodes' shirt over his head. Buck bashed Rhodes with the cowbell and tied him to a ring post. Rhodes fought back, using the cowbell to bash Buck repeatedly over the head. Back in the ring, the brawling continued, with referee Nick Patrick getting too close to the action and rendered unconscious. Colonel Parker snuck in to distract Rhodes, with Buck restraining the Natural. Rhodes kicked the cowbell out of Parker's hands and used it to smash Buck over the head. The referee awoke and made the 3 count, giving Rhodes the victory. Terry Funk raced to the ring, attacking Rhodes with a branding iron. With Rhodes rendered a bloody mess, Funk joined Buck in unleashing a brutal beatdown on the Natural. Officials stormed the ring, with Parker raising the arms of Buck and Funk. The Nature Boy Ric Flair defended the WCW World Heavyweight Championship against Colonel Robert Parker's surprise, Barry Windham. It wasn't long before Windham took the advantage, with Parker getting in cheap shots of his own behind the referee's back. Windham superplexed Flair off the top rope, floating over for a pinfall attempt. Flair kicked out at 2, and battled back with thunderous chops. The champion locked Windham in a figure 4, with the challenger barely making it to the ropes. Flair continued to wear down Windham until Parker got involved to aid Windham in an unsuccessful pinfall attempt. The Nature Boy jumped off the top rope with a high cross body and scored the pinfall victory on Windham. The Nasty Boys defended the WCW World Tag Team Championships against Cactus Jack and Kevin Sullivan in a Broad Street Bully street fight. Former Philadelphia Flyers player David Schultz served as the special guest referee. It was pandemonium from the start, with all 4 brawling on the floor. The fight spilled over the guardrail, with Cactus waffling Jerry Sags with a steel chair. Meanwhile, Sullivan hit Brian Knobbs with a pile driver onto the ramp. Cactus used a trash can to bash Sags over the head repeatedly. Knobbs suffered the same fate. Back at ringside, Cactus set Knobbs upon an aluminum trash can and soared off the second rope with a flying elbow drop. Knobbs moved, and Cactus crushed the trash can. Staggering to his feet, Cactus felt the trash can to the head, courtesy of Knobbs. Sags followed suit, bashing Cactus with the now mutilated trash can. All 4 battled on the ramp until Cactus clotheslined Knobbs back into the ring. Sags retaliated, hip-tossing Cactus off the ramp and crashing through a table. Cactus fought back, suplexing the remnants of the table onto Sags. Seconds later, Sags grabbed a piece of the table and smashed it over Cactus's head. All 4 battled over a trash can lid in all-out warfare. Back in the ring, Sags hit a flying elbow drop onto Cactus. Sags stole the referee's hockey stick, with Schultz ripping it from the hands of the champion. This led to a brawl between Sags and Schultz, with the latter getting the better of the exchange. A bloody Cactus smashed Sags over the head with the hockey stick and scored the pinfall victory. Sags and Sullivan were crowned the new World Tag Team Champions. Sags grabbed the hockey stick and swung it violently against the face of Cactus. Max Payne marched to the ring and smashed a guitar over the back of Sags' head to a huge ovation. An injured Dave Sullivan hobbled to the ring and smashed his crutch over Knobbs' face. Medics attended to Sags, who was knocked out cold and bleeding from the back of his head. In the main event, Sting battled Vader for the WCW International Heavyweight Championship. Vader was vicious, crushing Sting with a Vader Bomb. Sting kicked out, with Vader further wearing down the Stinger. Sting got his second wind and took down Vader with a series of right hands. Vader staggered to his feet, with Sting leaping towards him with a flying shoulder tackle. While Vader moved, Sting collided with referee Randy Anderson. Vader chokeslammed Sting and made the cover, but the referee was worse for wear. Looking to capitalize, Vader held back Sting's arms while Harley Race swung a steel chair. Sting moved, and Race accidentally bashed Vader. Sting spiked Vader with a DDT and made the cover. Vader barely kicked out. Sting attempted a Stinger Splash, but Vader caught him in midair. Vader power slammed Sting, and then soared off the top rope with a Vader Salt. Sting moved, and Vader crashed to the canvas. Just as Sting made the cover, Race jumped off the top rope with a diving headbutt. Sting moved, and Race landed on Vader. The Stinger dove off the top rope with a big splash and scored the pinfall victory over Vader. Sting was crowned the new WCW International Heavyweight Champion. The final round of the Marquis of Queensberry Cup took place on May 28th on Worldwide Wrestling. WCW World Heavyweight Champion the Nature Boy Ric Flair faced World Television Champion Lord Steven Regal for the final 5-minute time period. Regal began pretending that Flair had thumbed him in the eye. Flair didn't care and took the fight to Regal, who learned quickly that it was going to be a tough match. Regal tossed Flair to the floor, where Sir William struck Flair with an umbrella. Back in the ring, Regal dominated the last minute of the match. The referees convened with the judges and declared that the match was a draw. Referee Nick Patrick ordered 5 more minutes, with the match continuing. Flair and Regal battled back and forth in a hard-hitting exchange. William again struck Flair with the umbrella behind the referee's back. 30 seconds remained, with William tripping up Flair as he bounced off the ropes. Still, Flair caught Regal with a backslide and scored a pinfall victory to win the series and the Marquis of Queensberry Cup. Following the match, Tony Schiavone interviewed Flair, who was congratulated by Arn Anderson. Flair said, "Hogan, this is WCW, pal, and in my terms, that means the big time. And if you've got it, don't whisper it, don't tell it to your son, don't talk about it at night with your wife. Bring it down to Ted Turner, to WCW, and bring it to Ric Flair, 'cause baby, whether you like it or you don't like it, you big man will have to learn to love it. Woo!" The May 28th edition of Saturday Night saw Mean Gene Okerlund on the beach, finding Hulk Hogan for an interview. Hogan addressed the rumors that he'd face the WCW World Heavyweight Champion, the Nature Boy Ric Flair. The Hulkster promoted his new live-action adventure television show, Thunder in Paradise. Hogan said that he was putting feelers out, urging the Hulkamaniacs to let him know whether or not they want to see him in WCW. Mean Gene interviewed Arn Anderson, only to be interrupted by Colonel Robert Parker and the man formerly known as Haku in the WWF, but was now known as Ming. Parker offered Anderson a spot in his stud stable and tried to drum up controversy within the Horsemen. Anderson got riled up, with Ming getting in his face. In the main event, Lord Steven Regal defended the World Television Championship against the living legend, Larry Zbyszko. A great scientific match ensued, with Zbyszko keeping up with Regal. Sir William attempted to get involved, but Zbyszko made quick work of him. Regal capitalized on the distraction, pounding on Zbyszko. As the action raged on, Zbyszko refused to stay down, with no winner determined as the show went off the air. The tapes kept rolling, with Regal locking Zbyszko in a sleeper hold just as William hopped onto the apron. Zbyszko kicked off of William and heaved his body backwards onto Regal. The referee made the 3 count, and Zbyszko was crowned the new World Television Champion. The June 4th episode of Saturday Night began with Nick Bockwinkel making a blockbuster announcement. Bockwinkel said that at the next Clash of the Champions, the Nature Boy Ric Flair would face Sting to unify the WCW World and International Heavyweight Championships. Mean Gene commented that the news of Hulk Hogan coming to the company is the biggest news in WCW history. An irate WCW World Heavyweight Champion, the Nature Boy Ric Flair, interrupted. Flair said that he was the franchise player of WCW, not Hogan. Gene attempted to calm down Flair, who said, "I'm the Kingpin, I'm the wheel, not Hogan." Footage aired of Ray Traylor training in New York with the Guardian Angels. He got a glimpse of life on the streets and saw the good that he could do for the community. The June 11th episode of Saturday Night was live on location from MGM Grand Studios in Florida. Fans packed the streets, with Eric Bischoff announcing that they were there for the official contract signing of Hulk Hogan. The entire episode was devoted to hyping the appearance of the Hulkster. The big moment came, with the Mouth of the South Jimmy Hart leading the way, tossing shirts to the fans. A custom red and yellow Corvette drove down the street, with Hulk Hogan posing in the back seat. Mean Gene said it was the biggest day in professional wrestling. Red and yellow confetti fell from the sky as Hogan greeted the fans. The press conference began, with Mean Gene introducing Hogan to the stage. Gene handed Hogan a pen, which he used to sign his WCW contract. As Hogan held up his contract, Gene said, "Get ready for the ride of your life, ladies and gentlemen." The Hulkster said, "This has gotta be the greatest day in Hulk Hogan's wrestling career." Hogan hyped his accomplishments and said that he wants to go down as being immortal. He said that the only way to do that is to be the man. Hogan said, "My goal in the WCW is to go all the way to the top, and when I get Ted Turner by his arm, we're gonna find out who the most powerful man in the WCW is. He said that he wants the match with Ric Flair. Hogan said that he was going to prove that Hulkamania is the strongest force in the universe. The June 18th episode of WCW Pro saw Terror Rising reveal that he will now be competing under his real name, Jean-Paul Levesque. In addition, Levesque was now managed by Sir William. Levesque went on to compete against the World Television Champion, the living legend, Larry Zbyszko. Lord Steven Regal interfered, engaging in a fistfight with Zbyszko on the floor. Levesque was declared the winner by countout, with an irate Zbyszko challenging Regal to fight him in the ring. Regal threw down his jacket and raised his fists, but refrained from getting physical. The June 18th edition of Saturday Night saw Ray Traylor sworn in as an official member of the Guardian Angels in a ceremony. Arn Anderson raced to the ring to save Dustin Rhodes from a beatdown at the hands of Harlem Heat. Mean Gene interviewed Anderson and Rhodes, with the Natural asking Anderson to be his partner in a future match against Terry Funk and Bunkhouse Buck. Anderson said that he'd let Rhodes know his answer at the Clash of the Champions. From the streets of Universal Studios, Mean Gene interviewed Hulk Hogan in front of a crowd of people. Hogan said that he was going to do whatever it takes to get a shot at the WCW World Heavyweight Champion, the Nature Boy Ric Flair. The Hulkster said that he'd be at the Clash of the Champions to look Flair in the eyes and see what he's made of. Mean Gene interviewed the WCW World Heavyweight Champion, the Nature Boy Ric Flair, who hyped his upcoming title unification match against the WCW International Heavyweight Champion, Sting, at the Clash of the Champions. Flair addressed Hulk Hogan, saying, "You've got a long way to go before you're my equal." The Clash of the Champions took place on June 23rd and saw Lord Steven Regal challenge Larry Zbyszko for the World Television Championship. After a hard-hitting battle, Regal scored a pinfall on Zbyszko, holding onto the ropes behind the referee's back for leverage. Regal was crowned the new World Television Champion. Mean Gene Okerlund interviewed Dustin Rhodes and Arn Anderson about their potential teaming. Anderson accepted the proposal, agreeing to team with Rhodes at Bash at the Beach to face Terry Funk and Bunkhouse Buck. Mean Gene introduced Hulk Hogan, who came to the stage with Jimmy Hart. An excited Hogan expressed his intentions of challenging whoever wins the World Heavyweight Championship unification match. The WCW World Heavyweight Champion, the Nature Boy Ric Flair, appeared on the big screen, irate. Flair said, "I am going to show you firsthand why I am the greatest of all time." Hogan said that he knew it would come to this, and said, "What you gonna do when the Hulkster destroys you?" A promo aired, with Hulk Hogan and Jimmy Hart standing with basketball great Shaquille O'Neal, who was dressed in Hulk Hogan gear. Shaq said, "What you gonna do when Hulkamania runs wild on you?" The WCW World Heavyweight Champion, the Nature Boy Ric Flair, battled the WCW International Heavyweight Champion, Sting, in a title unification match. As Nick Bockwinkel collected the belts, Sensuous Sherry made her way down the aisle wearing Sting face paint. The fans were wild for the back and forth action between Flair and Sting in an exciting bout. Sting missed a Stinger splash, striking the turnbuckle to allow Flair to gain the advantage. The Stinger battled back, superplexing Flair off the top rope. Sting leaped off the top rope with a big splash, but Flair rolled out of the way. He didn't stay down long, with Sting clotheslining Flair over the top rope and to the floor. Sting dove over the top rope, with Flair shoving Sherri in harm's way, and the Stinger landing on her. Sherri got to her feet, with Sting checking on her from the ring. The distraction allowed Flair to roll up Sting and score the pinfall victory to become the unified WCW World Heavyweight Champion. Sherri hugged Flair, with Sting realizing he'd been set up. Flair clipped the knee of Sting, and Sherri connected with two big splashes off the top rope. Hulk Hogan raced to the ring, tore off his shirt, and got his hands on Flair, who quickly retreated. Sherri slapped Hogan across the face, with Flair pulling her away to safety. The June 25th episode of Saturday Night featured footage from CNN Center in Atlanta, Georgia. Mean Gene Okerlund hosted the contract signing for a match between the WCW World Heavyweight Champion, the Nature Boy Ric Flair, and Hulk Hogan. Both Flair and Hogan sat together at a table, with Ted Turner presiding over the signing. Turner said that WCW was about to dominate the globe of professional wrestling. Nick Bockwinkel presented Hogan with the contract, which he swiftly signed, while Flair took his time. Looking in Hogan's eyes, Flair said, "You can't beat Ric Flair." Hogan said that at Bash at the Beach, Flair would be history, and Hulkamania would prove to be the most dominant force in professional wrestling. The two yelled in each other's faces, with Turner ducking for cover underneath. Jimmy Hart whisked away Hogan as things began to intensify. The July 2nd edition of Saturday Night featured footage of boxing legend George Foreman training Hulk Hogan. Jimmy Hart coached them in a boxing ring, with Foreman punching Hogan in the stomach. Foreman said that if Hogan can take his best shots, he'll be ready for Bash at the Beach. Mean Gene interviewed the WCW World Heavyweight Champion, the Nature Boy Ric Flair, and Sensuous Sherri. Flair talked about an ad that ran in USA Today for his main event against Hulk Hogan at the Bash at the Beach. The Nature Boy said that under Hogan's name was the word challenger. Flair said that's how things will remain, him as champion and Hogan as challenger. An irate Sherri had harsh words for Jimmy Hart as the show came to a close. The July 9th episode of Saturday Night saw Mean Gene interview Hulk Hogan, who had Jimmy Hart by his side. Hogan introduced someone that would be by his side at the Bash at the Beach, Mr. T. The Hulkster dared any of the Nature Boy Ric Flair's friends to try and interfere. Mr. T said, "Don't worry about nothing, I've got you covered." In a unique concept, the fans were allowed to call in and vote for who they wanted to see compete in the main event. The results revealed a match between Sting and the WCW World Heavyweight Champion, the Nature Boy Ric Flair. Sensuous Sherri was barred from the building, angering Flair. Hulk Hogan came to ringside with a chair, taking a seat to watch the action. Sting took the fight to Flair, superplexing him off the top rope and locking in the Scorpion Deathlock. Someone wearing a disguise ran into the ring and attacked Sting and the referee. Hogan gave the mysterious person an atomic drop and ripped off their disguise. It was Sherry, with Hogan chasing after her. The distraction allowed Flair to ambush Hogan, attacking his knee. Mr. T raced to the ring, with Flair and Sherry retreating. Mean Gene caught up with Flair, who said that this was only a sample of what would happen at the Bash at the Beach. Hogan again chased off Flair and Sherry, and then joined Gene for an interview. Mr. T cut a promo with eating utensils in his hand, saying that he and Hogan were going to eat Flair for dinner. The July 16th edition of Saturday Night saw Mean Gene interview Hulk Hogan, Jimmy Hart, and Mr. T. Hogan said, "History will be made in Orlando, brother." Mr. T said that he pitied anybody that wanted to interfere. Hogan hyped all of the celebrities that would be in his corner, including Shaq and Hank Aaron. The Hulkster said, "What you gonna do when the largest arms in the world and Mr. T run wild on you? I pity the fool." Mean Gene interviewed the WCW World Heavyweight Champion, the Nature Boy Ric Flair, and Sensuous Sherry. Flair hyped his upcoming match with Hulk Hogan, and said, "You're in the game now. There's nowhere to run, nowhere to hide. Tomorrow night, it's you against me and the Queen." Sherry cut a promo on Hogan, and said, "You have met your match. Ric Flair is the man. He will always be the man. And diamonds are forever. And so is Ric Flair." The Bash at the Beach took place on July 17th from Orlando, Florida. Mean Gene Okerlund presented Antonio Inoki with a plaque honoring his illustrious career. The World Television Champion Lord Steven Regal interrupted, irate that he wasn't getting an award for his achievements. Regal put down the accomplishments of Inoki, saying, "Beating Muhammad Ali, beating the late great Andre the Giant doesn't wear with me. I am far superior to you." Inoki didn't take kindly to the disrespect, throwing down his jacket. Regal and Sir William retreated, with Inoki ready for a fight. The Natural Dustin Rhodes and Arn Anderson battled Terry Funk and Bunkhouse Buck, who had Colonel Robert Parker and Ming in their corner. It was hard-hitting, with Funk and Buck pummeling Rhodes for most of the bout. Rhodes battled back and made the tag, with Anderson fired up to enter the ring. Out of nowhere, Anderson spiked Rhodes with a DDT and dragged Funk on top. The referee made the 3 count, with Funk and Buck declared the winners. Anderson stomped on the fingers of Rhodes, with Funk and Buck joining in on the beatdown. Stunning Steve Austin defended the United States Championship against Ricky the Dragon Steamboat. Playing mind games, Austin had Dragon Slayer written on the back of his tights. An exciting bout ensued, with Steamboat gaining an early advantage until Austin kicked him low to shift the momentum. The Dragon fought through the pain and out-wrestled the champion on the mat until Austin caught Steamboat in midair and slammed him hard on the canvas. Austin raked Steamboat's face across the canvas and connected with a knee drop off the second rope. To add insult to injury, Austin grabbed the hand of a wary Steamboat and waved at the camera, saying, "Hi everybody." After battling on the floor, Steamboat connected with a flying overhand chop off the top rope to knock Austin onto the canvas. Steamboat made multiple rapid-fire pinfall attempts to no avail. Each man reversed a tombstone until Steamboat ultimately spiked Austin. Steamboat leaped off the top rope, with Austin pushing the referee in the way. Randy Anderson dodged a collision and threatened to disqualify Austin. Steamboat begged Anderson to let the match continue, with the referee agreeing. Austin rolled through a crossbody and hooked his feet on the ropes to get the 3 count on Steamboat. The team of Pretty Wonderful, Mr. Wonderful Paul Orndorff, and Pretty Paul Roma defeated Cactus Jack and Kevin Sullivan to become the new WCW World Tag Team Champions. On commentary, Tony Schiavone said, "It's time for the biggest match in the history of our sport." Michael Buffer made the ring announcements, first introducing the WCW Commissioner, Nick Bockwinkel. Buffer introduced the man that would present the belt to the winner of the match, Orlando Magic basketball star Shaquille O'Neal, who made his way to the ring to a huge ovation. The participants came out with the WCW World Heavyweight Champion, the Nature Boy Ric Flair, coming to the ring first with Sensuous Sherry. Hulk Hogan made his entrance next with Jimmy Hart and Mr. T by his side. The fans roared as both men locked up and Hogan tossed Flair around with ease. Hogan chased Flair out of the ring with the Nature Boy hiding behind Sherry. Back in the ring, Flair attempted a knee drop, with Hogan rolling out of the way and backing the champion into a corner. Hogan climbed to the second rope, punching Flair in the face while the fans counted along with every chop. Sherry grabbed the leg of Hogan, distracting him to allow Flair to connect with a running knee. On the floor, Sherry raised a chair high above Hogan, with Jimmy Hart snatching the weapon away at the last second. Back in the ring, Flair took down Hogan with a side headlock until the Hulkster hulked up. Hogan tossed Flair against the ropes and clotheslined him off the ring apron. The Hulkster back suplexed Flair onto the floor and then rolled him back into the ring. Hogan attempted a big leg drop, but Flair rolled out of the way. Flair attempted a figure 4, but Hogan rolled him up with an inside cradle for a 2 count. The Nature Boy suplexed Hogan to the mat, with Bobby Heenan on commentary saying, "Yes, yes, yes." Hogan got to his feet before Flair, with Heenan saying, "No, no, no." The Hulkster connected with a big boot and went for the cover, with Sherry pulling the referee out of the ring before he could count 3. With Hogan distracted, Flair clipped the knee and dragged him into the middle of the ring. Sherry dove off the top rope, landing on Hogan with a big splash. With a new referee calling the action, Flair locked Hogan in the figure 4. Hogan inched his way to the ropes to break the hold. Sherry took off her pantyhose and used it to choke the Hulkster behind the referee's back. Flair kicked at the leg of Hogan until the Hulkster hulked up, punching the Nature Boy repeatedly in the face. The back of Flair's head collided with Hogan's face, and the Hulkster dropped to the mat. Sherry dove off the top rope with a big splash, but Hogan rolled out of the way. Hogan tossed Flair off the top rope and crashing to the canvas. The Hulkster took down both Flair and Sherry with clotheslines. Hogan locked Flair in a figure 4, with Sherry tossing a foreign object into the ring. Shaq carried Sherry off the apron while Flair used brass knuckles to knock out Hogan. Flair made the cover, with Hogan barely kicking out. Hogan withstood Flair's chops and took him down with a big boot. The Hulkster hit a big leg drop, covered Flair, and scored the pinfall victory to a huge ovation. Hulk Hogan was crowned the new WCW World Heavyweight Champion. Fireworks burst above the ring as Shaq presented Hogan with the belt. Hogan posed in the ring, with Hart and Mr. T celebrating by his side. The cameras followed Hogan backstage, where he was greeted by Hacksaw Jim Duggan, B. Brian Blair, and the man formerly known as Brutus the Barber Beefcake. Mean Gene Okerlund interviewed the new champion from his dressing room. Hogan thanked all of his friends that helped him along the way. He said, "What is everybody gonna do now that the Hulkster still rules? Woo!" The July 23rd edition of Saturday Night saw Mean Gene interview the WCW United States Champion, Stunning Steve Austin, who talked about his recent success. Austin said that he wasn't impressed with Ricky Steamboat, which brought out the Dragon. Steamboat called Austin a punk, with the champion insulting the Dragon to his face. This caused Steamboat to smack Austin across the face. While Steamboat waited in the ring, Austin became irate on the floor. Mean Gene interviewed the Nature Boy Ric Flair and Sensuous Sherry about the events that transpired at Bash at the Beach. Flair congratulated Hulk Hogan for defeating him, but doubted he could do it again. Sherry said, "Hogan, before this gets over with, you will regret the day you ever heard of Ric Flair and Sensuous Sherry." The July 24th edition of the main event saw Ricky the Dragon Steamboat face the Nature Boy Ric Flair, who had Sensuous Sherry in his corner. Sherry got involved, attacking Steamboat behind the referee's back. Flair tried to take every shortcut possible, but Steamboat persevered. A frustrated Flair pushed referee Randy Anderson, who shoved the Nature Boy back. This allowed Steamboat to shift the momentum, but soon saw the referee accidentally get knocked out of the ring. Steamboat rolled up Flair, with nobody to make the count. Sherry screamed from the apron, with Steamboat pushing Flair against his manager to knock her off the apron. The crowd roared as Steamboat slammed Flair off the top rope and locked in a figure four. Sherry ran in and tried to break the hold, but Steamboat rolled her up to keep her at bay. Steamboat hit Sherry with an atomic drop to send her tumbling to the floor. The Dragon soared off the top rope with a high cross body and made the cover, but the referee was still knocked out. The United States Champion Stunning Steve Austin raced in, joining Flair and Sherry in beating down Steamboat. Referee Randy Anderson regained consciousness and called for a disqualification. Sherry dove off the top rope, hitting Steamboat with a big splash. Wrestlers raced in to save Steamboat, with Flair, Austin, and Sherry retreating. The July 30th edition of Saturday Night featured a statement from the WCW Commissioner, Nick Bockwinkel. He first announced that the match between Hulk Hogan and Nature Boy Ric Flair at Bash at the Beach was the most watched match in company history. A rematch was signed, which would take place at the Clash of the Champions in August. Bockwinkel addressed the interference by Sensuous Sherry, saying that she was being fined $25,000. Footage aired from a television taping days prior in Macon, Georgia. Bunkhouse Buck faced an enhancement talent who suffered a beatdown on the floor at the hands of Ming. The American Dream Dusty Rhodes entered the ring, attacking Buck with bionic elbows. Dusty got his hands on Colonel Robert Parker, striking him with elbows to the top of the head. Terry Funk tried to interfere, but was ambushed in the aisle by Dustin Rhodes. Ming stepped up to Dusty, with a locker room separating the two. The ring cleared, leaving father and son alone in the middle. Dusty apologized to Dustin for neglecting him as a child, in order to seek fame and fortune. Even now, Dusty said he's neglected Dustin when he's in need of a partner. Dusty insulted Terry Funk, Bunkhouse Buck, and Colonel Parker, calling them egg-sucking dogs. He addressed Arn Anderson, saying, "To hell with you." Dusty called Anderson a follower, not a leader, and said, "The view never changes." He asked Dustin for a favor, saying that he wanted to team with his son to battle Funk and Buck at the Clash of the Champions. Dusty said that he didn't need a handshake. Choking up, Dusty said, "What I need now from you is just a hug and a kiss to seal the deal, baby." Dustin embraced his father in an emotional moment. In the main event, Sting and Ricky the Dragon Steamboat battled the United States Champion Stunning Steve Austin and the Nature Boy Ric Flair, who had Sensuous Sherry in their corner. A great back and forth bout ensued, with Sherry getting involved behind the referee's back to give her team an unfair advantage. Things broke down, with all four battling in the ring. While Steamboat brawled with Austin, Sting locked Flair in a Scorpion Deathlock. Sherry leaped off the top rope, with Sting breaking his hold to catch her. Sting power slammed Sherry over the top rope, landing on Flair on the floor. Meanwhile, Austin hooked his feet on the ropes to pin Steamboat for the victory. Following the match, Mean Gene interviewed an irate Steamboat and Sting. Steamboat said that he'll do whatever it takes to face Austin for the United States Championship at the Clash of the Champions. The August 6th episode of Saturday Night saw Hacksaw Jim Duggan make his debut, defeating Rip Rogers. The Nature Boy Ric Flair was in action against Terry Taylor, with the WCW World Heavyweight Champion Hulk Hogan and Jimmy Hart appearing on the big screen. Hogan taunted Flair and said, "We've got something that used to belong to you, dude." Meanwhile, Flair scored a submission victory on Taylor via the figure 4 leg lock. Flair refused to let the hold go, with Hogan racing to the ring to take down both Flair and Sherry with a double clothesline. Mean Gene interviewed Hogan and Hart, with the Hulkster hyping his upcoming encounter against Flair at the Clash of the Champions. The Natural Dustin Rhodes, with his father, the American Dream Dusty Rhodes, in his corner, battled Bunkhouse Buck, who had Colonel Robert Parker and Ming in his corner. Ming distracted the referee, allowing Parker to trip up Dustin. Buck made the cover, with Dustin barely kicking out. Dusty hopped onto the apron and struck Buck with a bionic elbow. This allowed Dustin to score the pinfall victory. Arn Anderson ambushed Dustin, with Dusty making the save. While the WCW head of security restrained Dusty, Ming attacked Dustin. The locker room emptied to get between Dusty and Ming in a tense scene. The August 20th episode of Saturday Night saw Mean Gene interview Dusty and Dustin Rhodes. Dustin talked about the mistake he made by choosing Arn Anderson to be his partner. He said that Anderson would get his. Dustin hyped his match at the Clash of the Champions, teaming with his father to battle Terry Funk and Bunkhouse Buck. Dusty said, "It is a pleasure to ride this lightning bolt with my son." The Clash of the Champions took place on August 24th and saw Mean Gene Okerlund interview the World Heavyweight Champion Hulk Hogan. As Hogan stepped through the curtain, a masked man ambushed him with a lead pipe. The masked man clobbered Hogan on the back of the knee and raced away. Paramedics and officials attended to Hogan, who writhed in pain on the ground. Hogan was stretchered away from the scene, screaming in pain. Stunning Steve Austin defended the United States Championship against Ricky the Dragon Steamboat in a no disqualification match. During the bout, footage was shown of Hogan being loaded into an ambulance and driven to the hospital. Meanwhile, an exciting match ensued in the ring, filled with split-second near falls. Steamboat caught Austin with an inside cradle and scored the pinfall victory to become the new United States Champion. The Honky Tonk Man made his debut with a music video for his new theme song, Honky Tonk Baby. The American Dream Dusty Rhodes and the Natural Dustin Rhodes battled Terry Funk and Bunkhouse Buck in a wild bout. While Colonel Parker distracted the referee, Arn Anderson tripped up Dusty. Parker again tried to interfere, with Dustin knocking him off the ring apron. Anderson attacked Dustin to cause a disqualification and spiked the Natural with a DDT. Dusty attacked Anderson, but then went face to face with Ming. Before things got physical, Dusty walked away, but returned with a wooden chair in hand. Dusty smashed the chair over the head of Ming, who didn't budge. Ming pummeled Dusty and applied the Tongan death grip. Dustin tried to save his father, but was restrained by Colonel Parker and his team. Members of security tried to intervene, but were pummeled. Head of security Doug Dillinger and officials broke things up in a wild scene. The World Television Champion Lord Steven Regal faced Antonio Inoki in a hard-hitting bout. Picture-in-picture showed Hulk Hogan limping back into the arena with Jimmy Hart and Brother Brudai in tow. Inoki applied a choke sleeper on Regal to win the match by submission. In the main event, Hulk Hogan defended the WCW World Heavyweight Championship against the Nature Boy Ric Flair. They brawled around the ring and up the aisle, with Hogan pummeling Flair. Back in the ring, Flair attacked the injured left knee of Hogan to gain the advantage. Sensuous Sherry interfered behind the referee's back, hitting Hogan with a leg drop to the groin. Flair applied the figure 4 leg lock on Hogan, who writhed in pain. Hogan powered out of it and hit Flair with a big boot, with his left leg giving out. Crawling up to his feet, Hogan hit Flair with a leg drop. Hogan failed to capitalize, allowing Flair to once again apply the figure 4. The Hulkster reversed the hold, with both men tied up in the ropes. While the referee was busy with Jimmy Hart, Sherry used her shoe to strike Hogan. The referee made the 10 count, with Flair victorious by countout. Flair raised the world title over his head, with Hogan ambushing him. The Masked Man snuck in, tossing Jimmy Hart aside and attacking the knee of Hogan. With the Masked Man holding Hogan's leg in place, Flair launched off the top rope, crashing down on the knee of the champion. Flair locked Hogan in the figure 4, with the Masked Man running away. Sting raced into the ring, with Flair and Sherry retreating with the gold. The Stinger raised the arm of Hogan, who frantically looked around for his championship belt. Hogan was loaded back into the ambulance as the show came to a close. The August 27th episode of Saturday Night featured a vignette showing Dusty Rhodes driving his pickup truck to a bar. Dusty said that he needed to form a team for War Games, so he went to the baddest bar around. Once inside, Dusty walked around the raucous establishment and found the Nasty Boys. Dusty asked the Nasties if they were man enough to join his team to face Colonel Robert Parker's men at War Games. The Nasties began to attack their own friends, asking Dusty if he thought they were nasty enough. Dusty gave his seal of approval and made things official, with the Nasty Boys joining his team for War Games. Mean Gene interviewed Cactus Jack, who said that his partner Kevin Sullivan wasn't there. Cactus said that he owes a debt to Kevin for making him a household name. Despite this, Cactus said that their team is over and he wants to focus on being a singles wrestler. Dave Sullivan interrupted, upset with Cactus about ending their team. Cactus told Dave to get away, with a nervous Dave calling him Sustack. Angry, Cactus attacked Dave, spiking him with a DDT onto the floor. WCW Commissioner Nick Bockwinkel read a statement discussing the actions of the Nature Boy Ric Flair and Sensuous Sherry at the Clash of the Champions. Bockwinkel said that both Flair and Sherry were suspended indefinitely. The September 3rd episode of Saturday Night saw Mean Gene Okerlund interview Colonel Robert Parker and his army of Terry Funk, Arn Anderson, Bunkhouse Buck, and Ming. They weren't afraid of Dusty Rhodes, saying that he has a surprise for War Games. 18-year-old German upstart Das Wunderkind Alex Wright made his debut. Wright was victorious, defeating Brady Boone with a belly-to-belly suplex. On location, Mean Gene interviewed Hulk Hogan on the beach. Hogan gave an update on his knee, saying that he was feeling pressured to defend his title. He became irritated when Gene talked about Nature Boy Ric Flair, with Brother Brudeye saying he wasn't worth it. Hogan said that at any time, he's ready for Flair. The September 4th edition of the main event saw Dustin Rhodes team with the United States champion Ricky the Dragon Steamboat to battle Arn Anderson and Bunkhouse Buck. Terry Funk interfered, tripping up Dustin and allowing Anderson to pick up a pinfall victory. Sting informed the referee of the interference, with a second official verifying the story. The initial official reversed the decision, with Steamboat and Rhodes declared the winners. The September 10th episode of Saturday Night saw Mean Gene Okerlund catch up with the Nature Boy Ric Flair in Las Vegas. Flair wore the WCW World Heavyweight Championship around his waist, claiming that he was the man. He warned Hogan not to mess with him, and now he's suffering the consequences. As a crowd formed, an excited Nature Boy made his exit for a night on the town. Cactus Jack battled Kevin Sullivan to a double countout, with the brawling continuing after the bell. Leaping off the second rope, Cactus hit Sullivan with a flying elbow drop onto the concrete floor. Tony Schiavone interviewed Cactus, who talked about losing his ear in Germany. Cactus said that he was supposed to have a new ear attached, but Kevin Sullivan asked him to postpone the surgery so that they could go after the WCW tag team titles. He said that he and his family were banished to a life of misery. Cactus hyped his Loser Leaves Town match at Fall Brawl against Kevin Sullivan, saying, "Your devastation is my vindication." The September 17th edition of Saturday Night saw Mean Gene Okerlund return to the beach to catch up with the WCW World Heavyweight Champion, Hulk Hogan. While Jimmy Hart and Brother Brudeye packed up the boat, Hogan informed Gene that he was back on track with his knee. Hogan said that he had a way to get Ric Flair back into the ring. An anxious Gene asked Hogan what it was, but he wouldn't say. Hogan said he'd reveal his plan the following night at Fall Brawl. Fall Brawl took place on September 18th, beginning with Johnny B. Bad defeating Lord Steven Regal to become the new World Television Champion. Cactus Jack battled Kevin Sullivan in a Loser Leaves WCW match. Dave Sullivan stood in his brother's corner as a wild brawl ensued around ringside. Cactus pulled up the mats around the ring to expose the concrete floor. He climbed to the second rope, where Dave provided a distraction. This allowed Kevin to slam Cactus off the ropes and plummeting onto the concrete floor. Back in the ring, Kevin attacked the wounded remains of Cactus's right ear. On the floor, Cactus attempted a pile driver, but Kevin reversed it with a backdrop onto the concrete floor. Kevin bashed Cactus's face off the steel steps and took the action back into the ring. Raising a chair over his head, Kevin prepared to finish Cactus. Dave ripped the chair out of Kevin's hands, with the two engaging in an argument. Cactus charged, with Kevin moving, and Dave colliding with a wild jack. Kevin rolled up Cactus and picked up the pinfall victory. Per the stipulation, Cactus Jack was forced to leave the promotion. Commissioner Nick Bockwinkel announced that Ricky the Dragon Steamboat had suffered a career-ending back injury. Steamboat reluctantly handed over the United States Championship to an arrogant, stunning Steve Austin. Just as Austin tried to leave, Bockwinkel informed him that he had to defend his title. Out came Austin's opponent, Hacksaw Jim Duggan. In mere seconds, Duggan caught Austin off guard and scored a pinfall victory to become the new United States Champion. Sting, Vader, and the Guardian Angel competed in a triangle match to determine the number one contender. Per a coin toss, the match began with the Guardian Angel and Vader kicking things off in the first round. Vader pulverized the Angel, with Harley Race taking cheap shots behind the referee's back. The Angel battled back and Irish whipped Vader against the ropes, with the referee getting knocked out in the process. Still, the Angel hit his patented sidewalk slam and made the cover. Race attacked the Angel, allowing Vader to hit the Vader Bomb. A wary referee awoke to make the 3 count, with Vader advancing to the next round. After a brief rest period, Vader battled Sting to determine the number one contender. Vader was vicious, nailing Sting with a Vader Bomb early on. He attempted another, but Sting jumped to his feet and kicked Vader off the ropes. The fight went to the floor, where Race tried to attack the Stinger. Sting fought back and suplexed Race on the floor. Back in the ring, Sting suplexed Vader in an impressive feat of strength. Sting jumped off the top rope, connecting with a big splash. Sting tried for another splash, but Vader got his knees up. Vader moonsaulted off the top rope, with Sting moving and the big man crashing to the canvas. Sting superplexed Vader off the top rope and hit a big elbow drop. He followed it up by slamming Vader with a Samoan drop for a 2 count. Sting nailed a Stinger splash, followed by a clothesline, but it wasn't enough to keep Vader down. The Stinger hit a German suplex, with Vader again kicking out. With the referee distracted, Race bounced Sting's face off the ring steps. Vader dragged Sting back in and punished him with bruising punches. Sting fought back, taking down Vader with a flying clothesline. The Stinger dove off the top rope, landing on Vader with a big splash, but only for a 2. Vader gained the advantage and leaped off the second rope. Sting caught him, body slamming Vader for a big ovation. The Stinger attempted a Scorpion Deathlock, but the 20-minute time limit expired. A 5-minute overtime period was enforced, with both men battling, exhausted. No decision was rendered after 5 minutes, with a sudden death round implemented. This meant that the first person to knock their opponent off their feet would be the winner. Vader pounded on Sting, who stayed on his feet with wobbly legs. As Race tried to interfere, the Guardian Angel fought him up the aisle. With the referee distracted, Sting knocked Vader off his feet. A masked man attacked Sting and knocked him to the canvas. The referee turned around to see Vader on his feet, and Sting crumbled on the mat. Vader was declared the winner and the new #1 contender. Mean Gene Okerlund interviewed Hulk Hogan, who appeared via satellite from his gym. The Nature Boy Ric Flair appeared from the Mirage in Las Vegas, with multiple women by his side. Hogan and Flair had a conversation, with the Nature Boy calling himself the real world champion. Hogan said that he had a master plan to get Flair back into the ring. Flair wasn't eager to get back into the ring, saying he's making the most of his time away. Hogan said that with a bad knee, he's issuing a challenge to Flair, where the Hulkster would retire if he lost. After they hung up, Hogan took off his bandage and revealed that his knee was doing great. Shortly after, Nick Bockwinkel made the match official, saying it would take place inside of a steel cage. In the main event, Team Rhodes battled Team Parker inside War Games. The first 2 wrestlers to compete in the initial 5-minute period were Dustin Rhodes and Arn Anderson. Dustin was ferocious, bouncing Anderson against the cage and trapping his head between the 2 rings. The action continued, with Dustin diving over both sets of ropes to clothesline Anderson to the mat. After the time limit expired, the coin toss took place, with Parker's team winning. Bunkhouse Buck entered next, working with Anderson to pummel Dustin. 2 minutes elapsed, with Jerry Saggs the next wrestler to join the fray. Terry Funk was next, swinging one of his cowboy boots wildly to batter Rhodes and Saggs. Funk bashed the face of Dustin against the cage, right in front of Dusty Rhodes, who waited to enter. Saggs hit Funk with a pile driver into the gap between the 2 rings. Brian Knobbs evened things up and cleaned house, raking the face of Anderson across the steel mesh. Saggs got a hold of Funk's boot and began bashing Funk and Buck. Dustin got the boot and continued to inflict more damage. A sweat-covered Parker stalled getting into the cage, tiptoeing in to whip his opponents with a leather strap. Dustin got the leather strap and began whipping both Anderson and Parker. The final entrant was Dusty, who entered the cage to begin the match beyond. Dusty cleaned house and backed Parker into a ring with the Nasties. They beat down Parker, with a nervous Ming trying to break into the cage. Dusty put Parker in the figure 4 leg lock, with the Nasties dropping elbows on him until he submitted. The winner celebrated, with an irate Ming entering the cage to check on Parker. The September 24th episode of Saturday Night featured footage from the Halloween Havoc press conference in Detroit, Michigan. Eric Bischoff was the host, with boxing legend Muhammad Ali sitting at the head of the table. Bischoff announced the referee for the main event at Halloween Havoc, Mr. T, who promised to be an unbiased official. Both the Nature Boy Ric Flair and the WCW World Heavyweight Champion Hulk Hogan gave comments on their upcoming steel cage match. A confident Flair promised to send Hogan into retirement. Hogan said that he's a real champion, while Flair is wasting time partying instead of training. Reporters asked both Hogan and Flair questions about their upcoming rematch. Flair said, "Orlando was the biggest night of my life, even though I lost, the biggest match of my career, up until this point." With Hogan riled up, Flair said, "I'm gonna beat him." In closing, Flair said, "I'll haunt him the rest of his life if he wins that match." On the set, Mean Gene Okerlund interviewed the Nature Boy Ric Flair and Sensuous Sherry. Flair wore his bogus championship belt, saying that it means he's in charge of the wrestling world. He said that Hogan made the biggest mistake of his life by agreeing to the match. Dave Sullivan trudged onto the set wearing Hulk Hogan merchandise. He told Flair that he wasn't the real world champion. Hogan was. Flair told Dave to get back on his medication and never interrupt him again. The Nature Boy said, "Hogan, wherever you are, brother, learn to love it." Dave said that Hulkamania was going to live forever. Flair offered Dave a shot at the real world champion, with Kevin Sullivan storming onto the set. Kevin screamed at his brother and called Flair the real world champion. Flair told Dave that he had 30 minutes to apologize to him. Before the end of the show, Flair made his way to the set with Sherry by his side. Dave Sullivan interrupted again, saying that he wanted to wrestle the Nature Boy. Flair called Dave Forrest Gump, with Dave pointing his foam Hulk Hogan finger at the Nature Boy. Flair threw the foam finger aside, with Kevin racing out to chastise his brother. The October 1st edition of Saturday Night saw Mean Gene interview Kevin and Dave Sullivan. Dave said that he was proud to be a Hulkamaniac, with Kevin yelling at him. Footage aired from the prior week's episode of the main event, where the WCW World Heavyweight Champion Hulk Hogan presented Dave Sullivan with the boots that he wore to slam Andre the Giant. Dave wore the boots to compete against the Nature Boy Ric Flair, with Sensuous Sherry getting involved to cause a disqualification. Hogan ran in, attacking Flair and lifting him in the air by the neck. The mysterious masked man ran to the ring and climbed to the top rope. Brother Brudeye shoved the masked man to the mat, who rolled out of the ring and ran away. At ringside, Kevin Sullivan yelled at Dave, with Hogan intervening. Mean Gene interviewed Nature Boy Ric Flair, who had Sensuous Sherry by his side. Dave Sullivan interrupted, saying that he knows that with the power of the Hulkamaniacs, he can beat Flair. This made Sherry irate, with Flair threatening to beat up Dave. Out came Hulk Hogan, who said that he wasn't going to let anyone push around Dave anymore. Hogan said he's teaming with Dave to face Flair and a mystery partner. If they win, Flair will have to put his career on the line at Halloween Havoc. Flair accepted. The October 8th episode of Saturday Night saw Mean Gene interview the parents of Hulk Hogan, Ruth, and Pete. From their home, Mr. and Mrs. Hogan talked about how proud they are of their son's success. They expressed their concern about Hogan's match at Halloween Havoc with his career on the line. However, Mr. Hogan said that his son is no novice to steel cage matches. Hulk walked in, taking a seat on the couch between his parents and expressing how fortunate he is for his family. Sitting outside with Gene, Hogan questioned whether or not he's the greatest wrestler of all time. Footage aired of Ric Flair and Mr. T leaving a restaurant together. Mean Gene speculated what this could mean, since Mr. T will be the referee at Halloween Havoc. The October 9th episode of the main event saw Mean Gene interview the WCW World Heavyweight Champion Hulk Hogan, who had Jimmy Hart and Brother Brudai by his side. Hogan brought out Dave Sullivan and gifted him a robe that was airbrushed with Hulkster art. Kevin Sullivan interrupted, irate that Dave was spending so much time with Hogan. As Dave trembled, Hogan stood up to Kevin. Dave said that he's a man and punched Kevin in the face. Hogan and company cheered on Dave as Kevin retreated. In the main event, the WCW World Heavyweight Champion Hulk Hogan and Dave Sullivan were in action against the Nature Boy Ric Flair and the mysterious Masked Man. Sensuous Sherry got involved, further stacking the deck against Hogan and Sullivan. Hogan tagged in and cleaned house, getting his hands on the Masked Man. Just as Hogan prepared to rip off the mask, a second Masked Man raced in, clipping the knee of the Hulkster. The referee called for a disqualification as Flair attacked the wounded knee of Hogan. On the floor, Kevin Sullivan put the boots to his brother Dave. Jimmy Hart and Brother Brudai raced to the ring, with Flair, Sherry, and a Masked Man making their exit. The main event of the October 15th episode of Saturday Night saw Sting battle Vader, who had Harley Race in his corner. Sting was ruthless, superplexing Vader off the top rope. Vader battled back and crushed Sting with a Vader bomb, with the Stinger barely kicking out. Vader jumped off the second rope, with Sting catching him in midair with a body slam. The momentum shifted back to Vader, who landed on Sting with a big splash. Sting flopped his arm up to kick out of a pinfall attempt. Out of desperation, Sting fought back, tossing Vader with a German suplex. Race tripped up Sting to cause a disqualification, with the Guardian Angel racing to the ring. After punching Race, the Angel attacked Vader. The Angel handcuffed Race to a turnbuckle and prepared to smash him with a chair. Doug Dillinger and WCW officials stepped in to prevent the Angel from causing any serious damage. The October 22nd episode of Saturday Night saw Mean Gene interview the WCW World Heavyweight Champion Hulk Hogan, who was backed by Jimmy Hart and Brother Brudai. Hogan hyped his upcoming match against Ric Flair, saying, "I'm gonna tear him limb from limb." The Hulkster addressed Mr. T, saying he didn't believe the rumors of Flair and T being in cahoots. Hogan said that the power lies with Hulkamania, and he's going to destroy Flair inside the steel cage. He closed by saying, "What you gonna do, Ric Flair, when me and my Hulkamaniacs run wild on you?" The October 23rd episode of the main event saw the World Heavyweight Champion Hulk Hogan cut a promo behind a steel cage. With Jimmy Hart and Brother Brudeye by his side, Hogan shredded a head of lettuce across the steel mesh, demonstrating what he intended to do to Ric Flair. Halloween Havoc took place on October 23rd from the Joe Louis Arena in Detroit, Michigan. Pretty Wonderful defeated Stars and Stripes to reclaim the WCW World Tag Team Championships. Kevin Sullivan battled Dave Sullivan, who debuted the new theme song, I Wanna Be a Hulkamaniac. Dave wore his Hulk Hogan gear and wrestled in his magic yellow slippers. The match wasn't pretty, with Dave getting a fluke victory by countout. The Natural Dustin Rhodes battled Arn Anderson in a hard-hitting bout. Colonel Robert Parker and Ming stood in Anderson's corner, watching Anderson and Rhodes slug it out in the ring. Out of nowhere, Rhodes scored a pinfall victory. Anderson attacked Rhodes after the bell, with officials stepping in to break things up. WCW Senior Vice President Eric Bischoff presented boxing legend Muhammad Ali with a plaque for all of his incredible accomplishments. In the main event, Hulk Hogan defended the WCW World Heavyweight Championship against the Nature Boy Ric Flair in a steel cage match. The loser would be forced to retire. Mr. T served as the special guest referee. Sensuous Sherry stood in the corner of Flair, while Jimmy Hart and Brother Brudeye stood in the corner of Hogan. The Hulkster was ruthless in the early minutes, with Mr. T laying down the law. Hogan bounced Flair off the cage, but the Nature Boy shifted the momentum by attacking the wounded knee of the Hulkster. The champion recovered, ramming Flair against the cage like a javelin. Hogan used his shirt to choke Flair, with Mr. T stepping in to break things up. Both Mr. T and Hogan argued, with the Hulkster shoving T. Flair hit Hogan with a double axe handle off the top rope. They chopped back and forth, with Hogan winning the exchange. Flair tried to climb out, but Hogan caught up to him, ramming his face against the cage. The tides turned again, with Flair honing in on the knee of the champion. Flair tore the tape off the knee of Hogan, with Mr. T throwing the Nature Boy aside. Soon after, Flair applied the figure 4 leg lock on the Hulkster. Just as Hogan reversed the move, Flair broke the hold. Hogan charged off the ropes, accidentally knocking down Mr. T. Flair began stomping on T, while Sherry began to climb the cage. Jimmy Hart chased after Sherry, pulling her dress off. Sherry kicked him aside and climbed back up the cage, with Sting chasing after her and pulling her to the floor. A masked man emerged from under the ring and bashed Sting with the steel pipe. Hart tried to interject, but got bashed by the lead pipe. Sherry dove off the top of the cage, striking Hogan with a double axe handle. Hogan didn't budge, but soon went down once Flair attacked his knee. Sherry handcuffed T to the middle rope, and then joined Flair in ramming Hogan's head against the cage, where the masked man held the lead pipe. Hogan got his second wind, body slamming both Flair and Sherry. The Hulkster nailed Flair with a big boot and hit a big leg drop. Mr. T made the 3 count, with Hogan retaining the title. As Hogan celebrated, the masked man snuck up behind him with the lead pipe. Hogan turned around just in time, clobbering the masked man and revealing his identity. It was Brother Brudeye, with Bobby Heenan on commentary saying, "That man has butchered a friendship." Kevin Sullivan raced in, as well as the man formerly known as Earthquake. They joined Brudeye in beating down Hogan, with the former Earthquake crashing onto the Hulkster with multiple avalanche splashes. Sting raced to the ring, leaping off the top rope to take down Earthquake and Brudeye with a high cross body. The October 29th edition of Saturday Night saw Mean Gene interview the trio known as the Faces of Fear: Kevin Sullivan, the Avalanche, and the Butcher. Defensive, the Butcher said that he was the reason for Hulk Hogan's success. All three talked trash about Hogan, Sting, and Dave Sullivan. A betrayed Hulk Hogan cut a promo with Jimmy Hart by his side. Hogan said that the rulebook was thrown out the window and he's coming for the Butcher's soul. Mean Gene interviewed Sting, who had Dave Sullivan by his side. Kevin Sullivan interrupted and attempted to bully his brother. Sting stepped up to Kevin, leading to an impromptu match in the ring. The Stinger was quick to apply the Scorpion Deathlock, with the Butcher and the Avalanche ambushing Sting. Avalanche bounced off the ropes and squashed Sting and Dave with Avalanche drops. The November 5th edition of Saturday Night saw Mean Gene interview Vader, who had Harley Race by his side. Vader hyped his upcoming match against the Natural Dustin Rhodes at the Clash of the Champions. He said that he was coming to inflict pain, and then planned on going after the World Heavyweight Championship. The November 12th episode of Saturday Night saw Mean Gene interview the WCW World Heavyweight Champion Hulk Hogan, who had Jimmy Hart in his corner. Hogan hyped his participation in an upcoming 6-man tag match at the Clash of the Champions, saying he's going to slam Avalanche and cause an earthquake in Jacksonville. The Hulkster said that the power of Hulkamania is going to crush the three Faces of Fear. In the main event, Sting teamed with Dave Sullivan to face Kevin Sullivan and Avalanche. The Butcher interfered, attacking Sting to cause a disqualification. Hulk Hogan raced in, with the three Faces of Fear making their exit. Mean Gene interviewed Hogan, Sting, Sullivan, and Jimmy Hart, hyping their upcoming match against the three Faces of Fear at the Clash of the Champions. The Clash of the Champions took place on November 16th, beginning with Stars and Stripes defeating Pretty Wonderful to become the new WCW World Tag Team Champions. Harlem Heat battled the Nasty Boys and unveiled their new manager. Stevie Ray made a call on his cell phone, with Sensuous Sherry assisting Harlem Heat in gaining a victory. The Natural Dustin Rhodes battled Vader, who had Harley Race in his corner. It was a hard-hitting encounter that saw Rhodes take Vader to the mat, rip off his mask, and slap his face repeatedly. The crowd roared as Rhodes caught Vader and planted him with a big power slam. Rhodes unknowingly shoved referee Randy Anderson aside and attempted to catch Vader with a running bulldog. With the referee trying to gain his bearings, Vader reversed the bulldog, illegally tossing Rhodes over the top rope and crashing to the floor. Vader hit Rhodes with 2 Vader bombs, with the Natural barely kicking out. Jumping off the second rope, Vader soared towards Rhodes, who caught the big man and planted him with a power slam. Rhodes took down Vader with a lariat off the top rope, but only gained a 2 count. They fought to the second rope, with Rhodes spiking Vader with a brutal DDT. Vader kicked out. Rhodes hit the running bulldog on Vader, with Race climbing into the ring to break up the pinfall attempt. The distraction allowed Vader to capitalize and score the pinfall victory over Rhodes. Vader continued his assault until the United States Champion Hacksaw Jim Duggan made the save, wielding a 2x4. This caused Vader and Race to retreat, allowing Duggan to check on a hurt Rhodes. In the main event, the WCW World Heavyweight Champion Hulk Hogan, Sting, and Dave Sullivan battled the three faces of fear, Kevin Sullivan, the Butcher, and the Avalanche. Mr. T served as the special guest referee for a wild bout that saw Hogan, Sting, and Dave wearing matching red and yellow face paint. Dave injured his arm early on, with officials taking him away to leave Hogan and Sting to fend for themselves. Kevin Sullivan stole Jimmy Hart's megaphone and raised it high above the head of Hogan. Before Kevin could cause any damage, Mr. T snatched the megaphone away. Hogan covered Kevin and scored the pinfall victory. Furious, Kevin bashed Mr. T over the back of the head with the megaphone. The Butcher and the Avalanche joined in on the beatdown, with Kevin using the megaphone to batter Hogan. The Butcher locked Hogan in a sleeper hold as the locker room raced to the ring to try and break things up. The Avalanche and Kevin Sullivan fended everyone off until Doug Dillinger and security broke things up. Hogan lay on the mat unconscious, with Jimmy Hart and a doctor tending to him. As Kevin Sullivan walked up the aisle, he said, "We just destroyed the King." The November 26th edition of Saturday Night saw Hacksaw Jim Duggan defend the United States Championship against Stunning Steve Austin, who was accompanied by his new manager, Harley Race. With the referee distracted, Race pulled the top rope down as Duggan tried to bounce off it. This caused Duggan to spill to the floor, where Race attempted a pile driver. Duggan backdropped Race onto the floor, which brought out Vader. Duggan was ambushed by Vader, with the referee calling for a disqualification. Vader charged, with Duggan moving, and Vader bouncing his face off a steel ring post. Duggan waved around the 2x4, with Sting standing by his side to fend off Vader and Race. The December 3rd episode of Saturday Night was live from Atlanta, with Eric Bischoff making a huge announcement. He revealed that in the studio that night would be the debuting Macho Man Randy Savage. Later in the broadcast, Mean Gene introduced Macho Man Randy Savage, who received a standing ovation. Savage said, "I'm here for one reason, and one reason only, and that is to confront the man that goes by the name of Hulk Hogan." He said that he had a problem with Hogan being the champion, and called him number 2. Gene informed Savage that Hogan wasn't there, but he'd be at Starcade in Nashville. Savage said that he'd be at Starcade to confront the Hulkster. He said, "Macho Man and Hulk Hogan have a date with destiny." The December 10th edition of Saturday Night featured security footage from a jail. Backed by Ming, Colonel Robert Parker approached an officer looking to bail out his friend, the Blacktop Bully. The officer informed Parker that the bail was set for $75,000 due to a laundry list of charges. While Parker didn't have the money, he was still allowed to speak to the bully. Parker informed an unreasonable bully that he had a job for him and was going to get him out of there. The December 17th edition of Saturday Night saw Colonel Parker and Ming return to the prison. A government employee was there from the Exchange Commission to question Parker about his motives. Parker couldn't be bothered, more concerned with the release of the Blacktop Bully. After signing paperwork, the bully was released into the custody of Parker. Once outside, Parker gifted the bully with his old 18-wheeler. The bully was grateful, saying he'd take care of whatever Parker needs. The December 24th episode of WCW Pro featured footage of Hulk Hogan reading "'Twas the Night Before Christmas" at the 6th Annual Children's Christmas Concert in Clearwater, Florida. Starcade 94 took place on December 27th in Nashville, Tennessee. Footage aired from a banquet where Bill Apter presented the award for the Pro Wrestling Illustrated Wrestler of the Year. The recipient of the award was the WCW World Heavyweight Champion, Hulk Hogan. In the opening match, Hacksaw Jim Duggan defended the United States Championship against Vader, who had Harley Race in his corner. Vader was ruthless and attempted a moonsault off the top rope. Duggan moved, with Vader crashing to the canvas. Race broke up a pinfall attempt, sticking his thumb in the eye of Duggan. Bending down into a three-point stance, Duggan charged at Vader. Race stood on the apron with a 2x4, with Vader moving and Duggan colliding with his own weapon. Vader dropped Duggan on his face and scored the pinfall victory to become the new United States Champion. John Paul Levesque was in action against Das Wunderkind, Alex Wright. It was an exciting back-and-forth match, with Wright rolling up Levesque and scoring an upset victory out of nowhere. Footage aired of Bill Apter presenting the Pro Wrestling Illustrated Award for the Most Popular Wrestler of the Year. The recipient of the award was Sting. Mr. T faced Kevin Sullivan, with Dave Sullivan lurking around ringside, dressed like Santa Claus. Jimmy Hart gave Dave the megaphone, which he put in his Santa bag. Dave whacked Kevin across the back of the head, with Mr. T scoring the pinfall victory. Furious, Kevin attacked Dave, dragging him into the ring and spiking him with a pile driver. Kevin stole Dave's belt and began to whip him with it. Dave was left in a crumbled heap, with Kevin satisfied with the damage he'd caused. Footage aired of Bill Apter presenting the Pro Wrestling Illustrated Award for Manager of the Year. The recipient was the Mouth of the South, Jimmy Hart. In the main event, Hulk Hogan defended the WCW World Heavyweight Championship against the Butcher, who had Kevin Sullivan and the Avalanche in his corner. During his entrance, the Butcher tore a Hulk Hogan shirt in half and stomped on it. With Jimmy Hart by his side, Hogan came to the ring carrying a chair. Nick Bockwinkel sent Sullivan and Avalanche back to the locker room to ensure a fair fight. The Butcher used a microphone cord to choke Hogan and gain the advantage. He then tried to smash Hogan with a chair, with Jimmy Hart ripping the weapon from the Butcher's hands, just in time. Back in the ring, the Butcher wore the Hulkster down, with Jimmy Hart rallying the fans up to cheer for Hogan. The Butcher locked in the sleeper hold, but accidentally broke the hold when he thought Hogan's arm had slapped the mat 3 times. Hogan hulked up, which brought out Sullivan and Avalanche. After Hogan fended them off, he hit the Butcher with the leg drop and scored the pinfall victory. With the 3 Faces of Fear cornering Hogan, the Macho Man Randy Savage raced to the ring. After gaining the trust of Sullivan, Savage attacked the 3 Faces of Fear and ultimately sided with Hogan. Mean Gene interviewed Hogan from his dressing room, where wrestlers were waiting to celebrate. Gene pointed out that Hogan seemed down, with the Hulkster admitting that it wasn't easy having to defeat an old friend. Vader barged in and went toe-to-toe with the Hulkster, challenging him to a World Heavyweight Championship match. Looking into Hogan's eyes, Vader asked the Hulkster if he was afraid of him. Vader said, "I have no fear, I feel no pain. I am the #1 contender. Hogan shoved Vader, leading to a pull-apart in the dressing room. As things settled down, Bockwinkel said that Vader was out of line, and he'd have to think about whether or not he'll get his title match. Gene said, "Nick Bockwinkel is double-talking me, more of that bureaucratic BS. I don't know if I can take it." Tony Schiavone and Bobby the Brain Heenan signed off to end the broadcast. Would Hulk Hogan be able to fend off Vader in the new year? Find out next time as we continue our WCW arc and cover World Championship Wrestling in 1995. If you'd like to support the show, please like, share, and subscribe. You can follow us on Instagram at squared.circle.history. We also have Squared Circle History and Pro Wrestling Rushmore merchandise available on Pro Wrestling Tees. Thank you for listening, and keep dropping elbows.